Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to today's session on through hiking the TCT. If you're lost, I don't know what to tell you. Good luck. But we're glad you're here. And we're going to get straight into it because we've got a lot of good stuff to cover over the next hour. And I think it's going to be fun. We're here to answer all your questions and hopefully give you a really good sense of the trail. So today, basically, what we're going to do is I'll do a quick overview of the TCT route through Georgia and Armenia, as well as the project itself and how it's been developing over the last 9 years, which is a little crazy at this point. And then we've got a lot of time reserved for Q&A to talk about a lot of the questions that most often come up for hikers when they're planning their trips. And to help with that, I'm really happy to have here a couple veteran TCT hikers and volunteers to answer all of your burning questions so that you're not just hearing from the folks involved in the organization, but also people who have come from other parts of the world, new to the Caucasus and experienced that journey on the ground. So we're gonna get right into it. Before we do that though, I just want to set expectations very, very clearly about what you're getting into if you're hiking the TCT. So number one, I hope you're ready to have a pretty loose definition of what the word trail means. But number two, if you're excited about having a really unique adventure in one of the most biologically and culturally diverse parts of the world, you're in the right place. There's a lot of type 2 fun involved, but you're gonna have a good time. So that's me. My name's Megan. I'm the executive director of the TCTA, and I love chatting with hikers and participating in our forums and hosting these types of events because I am a hiker. And I thru-hiked TCT Armenia back in 2021 when we were finalizing and testing out the new route. I've also, done a lot of the mapping and scouting of the Georgia routes to get it to the state that it is now. So if you have angry thoughts and comments about the trail, you can send them my way. And probably I'll agree with you in some sections. But it's a lot of fun being out there in the Caucasus. And yeah, so today on the call as well, I've got a couple of folks. I'll ask them to just pop on camera real quick and say hi. So if we can go around the screen, Katya. Wait, is Katya here? Katya's running a little late. Harry, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Megan. I'm Harry Curl. I hiked the TCT North-South route going northbound in 2023. So that's through Armenia and Georgia. So hopefully I can answer any questions about doing that through hike. And I, for a living, make maps. So any questions about GPS or routes, I'm also very happy to help. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Over to Leia.
Yes, thank you, Megan. Hi, I'm Leah. I'm from Switzerland, and I've thru-hiked an early prototype of the route in 2018 through Armenia and to the south of Georgia. So my Armenia experience, it has a lot of overlap with the current route, but it's not 100% the same. So, but I think I can still have the overall experience. And then last year I went back and hiked a large section of the current Georgia route. So I can also assist with questions on that or general hiker questions that you have.
Yeah, Alexandra.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I hiked various different sections of the TCT in 2023. I did the Guba-Gusar route in Azerbaijan, kind of scattered portions in Georgia, and then the Legends Trail and also parts of Bilejan in Armenia. Currently, I work in international education, so trying to get students from the US to study abroad in the Caucasus and experience this really great region.
Matt, I see you're on. Do you want to say a quick hi as well?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt. I actually don't have a lot of experience hiking on the TCT, but I participated in the International Trail Building Program in August last year. So if you do end up through hiking the TCT and you go through Svaneti, I may have worked on part of that trail. But like a lot of you on this, I'm hoping to through hike the TCT maybe one day. I'm currently a Peace Corps volunteer in Georgia. I arrived 2 weeks ago, so I'm really looking forward to getting some more information in this call.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you want to talk to anyone about volunteering and what that experience is like, Matt's your guy. So without any further ado, just in case you're lost and need a little reorientation, this is where the Caucasus are located. As you can see, it's a pretty interesting part of the world, a bit of a nexus point between lots of different cultures, historically a huge intersection area of trading posts and cultures moving across the region, which has led to a really interesting history, which oftentimes you'll encounter all the way along the trail. And what we've been doing in this region over the last 9 years is working on developing a 3,000-kilometer hiking trail network across the region called the Transcaucasian Trail. And as you can see here from the solid and dotted lines on the map, about half of that is now open to hikers. And we're actively working to expand that trail network as well to improve trail conditions on the ground, build up local hiking and trail building communities, and really use the trail as a mechanism to support sustainable tourism development and cultural exchange along the trail. But today we're going to focus on the first half of this route, stretching across Armenia and Georgia, what we've begun to refer to as the north-south thru-hiking route. And this is how you can hike 1,500 kilometers, connecting 2 different countries through some of the most diverse and interesting landscapes, really anywhere in the world. And we're going to give you a little rundown of what that's like. But if you're curious about what it looks like to develop a trail network like that, I mean, it's sometimes a lot of like driving around in a pretty janky 4x4. Sometimes a lot of this, of finding the shepherds and asking them for, directions over the mountain pass or where they used to take their flocks of sheep. Sometimes it's a lot of this. This is an Arvik National Park, which you'll hear about in a minute because you too can experience this joy. Sometimes it's a lot of this, actually getting volunteers together and building trails on the ground. And sometimes it's a lot of this because this is what happens when you have a bunch of young people from the Caucasus working together to build trails. It devolves into a lot of dance parties. And if you're lucky while hiking the trail, you will almost certainly encounter some of this too. We've got an international team of people from Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan working together to build this, which is a really cool and unique part of the project that doesn't happen too often in this region. That's much more often defined by its wars and closed borders and conflicts. But, we're all hikers. It's really something special that can bring people together. And we've worked all over the region to improve some of the trail conditions and to restore some of these historical trails so that they are open and accessible for people like you. So with that, I'm going to give a little overview of this route just to kind of really blitz walk you through what you can expect to encounter on your thru hike if you choose to tackle this whole route. And as we're going through this, I would also encourage you to think about, if you're considering a section hike and just taking a couple weeks off to hike part of the TCT, or you can even only come out for 1 week, this is designed to also help you pinpoint, okay, that section looks like the type of thing I want to experience. And then you can come back for the rest of the thing in the coming years, just as, many of the people here have done. So we're going to start from south to north down in Megri, which, as you can see here, is at the Iranian border with Armenia. And this is a really cool city, bit of an old trading post over here, nestled in these really jagged mountains. And the most important thing to know about this section is that it is spectacular and also possibly the second worst trail conditions that you'll ever experience in your life. The first are in Georgia, but we'll get to that later. But we have been actively building a trail here that's taken the conditions a long way since we started in 2022, but it's not done. And so you should definitely expect a lot of bushwhacking in this section, some off-trail navigation, and a really, really steep climb to start it out. Other noteworthy things include the vipers in the region, the ancient churches that are sometimes speckled throughout the national park, and the really dramatic sunsets. So, you get a bit of all worlds. After that, we're going to move on to Kapan to Sisian. So this is really going through some of the most historical heart of Armenia. If you want a section to geek out on monasteries and really explore the historical sites and get deep into that. I mean, here you'll see the ancient monasteries of Datev, even some fun Soviet monuments, a lot of cool old trading post relics, as well as it's a great section for local hospitality and for staying in guest houses along the way and meeting people on the grounds. Having some computer issues. There we go. After that, we're going to move up into starting to get into the desert territory, which gets really exciting. This is another big chunk for the monasteries. Here on the top left, we've got the famous Noravank, and you go through some really cool canyons, stop by some cave churches. If you're lucky, you might get invited to a big traditional feast. And these like really dramatic rocky outposts are sort of interspersed with these stretches of winding hills and agricultural lands where you'll often see people out, depending on the season, either planting or gathering hay or collecting apricots, that sort of thing. So it's a great chance to stop and chat with people. After that, we're moving on, as we slowly start to climb towards the highlands, you get a little bit more into, again, this rolling terrain. This is the area where you're most likely to see the famous Armenian bezuar goats anywhere on the trail, as well as, according to multiple hikers, the most likely place you are to see a bear, which is not necessarily what you would expect in this terrain. But if you do, write to us and let us know, because we are eagerly collecting that data. After that, the landscapes start to change super dramatically as you move up into the highlands. So the Gegam Mountains, you can see here on the map, are this heartland of central Armenia, where basically out of nowhere, you climb to a 3,000-meter volcanic plateau. You've got, some slow, wide river crossings. Depending on the season, you may well have to navigate some such sections of snow. You've got these big, beautiful alpine lakes, and just this vast rolling volcanic terrain, periodically dotted with the shepherds who live here throughout the summer and who make this their home. And so you'll see their tents dotted throughout, as well as their very fierce guard dogs that often hang around. We can chat about that in the safety section, because I know it's a very common question for hikers, and it should be. After that, we're heading up into the forests of Dilijan, which is where the TCT actually had its very first trail building project in Armenia back in 2017. And that trail network has come a long way since then. But there's still a few parts towards the upper part of the national park that are a little rough. So again, get your GPS ready. This is a great section to feast on local gata, Armenian pastry, to visit some of the monasteries, to stay at the TCT Hikers Hostel, which was started by one of our co-founders, and to generally probably bask in the first company of fellow hikers that you may have experienced the entire trail, because it's become much more of a little local hiking hub. After that, we're moving as we head towards northern Armenia up into the Lori region, where we traverse some big open highlands, these beautiful green rolling hills, meet some shepherds along the way who are often up there with their dairy cattle, traverse some really ancient, beautiful stone cases, and visit a lot of monasteries. There's several UNESCO sites along this section of trail, and it's really a beautiful and it's kind of underrated part of the country. And after that, we're moving towards the northern border of Armenia. This is nearly 850 kilometers, I think about 820 this year. So you'll have your trail legs well in hand at this point as you're traversing the last of Lori's dramatic canyons, moving into these big open plateaus. And when you reach the TCT Armenia terminus at Lake Arpi National Park, you'll be able to high-five our little trail sign up there that we installed pretty recently, thanks to one of our projects with a partner called People in Need there. So make sure you take a selfie, because that's really what it's for, and it makes us happy to see them. So that was a super brief run through of Thru-Hiking Armenia, but we're not done. We're moving to Georgia, okay? So we're going across the border. You have to use the official border crossings please, please, for the love of God, do not attempt to cross the border at any unofficial places. That would be very bad news for you. But it's a pretty gentle border crossing, and it's a pretty quiet one. So as you go through that checkpoint, you know, you'll see a few truckers perhaps, but other than that, it's pretty much open road. After that, you climb quite quickly into the highlands of Java Kheti, where it's also a really big traditional shepherding area. Most people who live in this region are actually ethnically Armenian and speak Armenian. So, you know, even as you switch past the border, you probably won't notice too much difference in the way of culture and language. The Java Kheti Abu Samsari range is another high altitude volcanic range. So you get up to around 3,000 meters as you traverse these beautiful alpine lakes and probably deal with a little bit of snow. And if you're willing to take a couple side detours, there's a few megalithic fortresses along the way from the Bronze Age that are very well worth the detour. And this is all pretty open terrain, easy to see where you're going, easy to navigate, but not always too much in the way of an actual physical trail. After that, we start moving into the forests of Georgia. That transition happens super fast as you come over the ridge from Lake Tapatskuri up on the left and suddenly hit the large forests around Bakuriani and moving north towards Borjomi. Here's where the trail starts to get a little bit less exciting for a while as we send you on a rather long and grueling stretch of dirt roads and jeep tracks traversing river valleys. This is a section that we're actively working to improve and reroute, but for the time being, it is a pretty long road walk until you hit what we consider to be the Imereti to Racha section of the TCT, which you can find trail notes for on our website. And that's where you start using an old trail that climbs to this really dramatic ridge, which you can see here on the top left with your first amazing view of the full Greater Caucasus, where they're just suddenly right in front of you. And that's a really great section that we've been working to restore over the past couple years. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites. This is also where you'll need to register for your border permits for the upcoming section. We'll talk about that. But here from Oni onwards, as you can see, we're starting to get into northern Georgia and very close to the border with Russia. So we are entering into the border zone, and you need to make sure you have your permits in hand. This is also where you're about to experience possibly the first toughest trail conditions of your life. You can see Leia there on the bottom left, knees deep in the river, which is the best option for walking. This section, the middle part of this section, is a part of the TCT that we've been working to actively build for the last 5-6 years and is still very much in progress. There's an old trail connecting these two mountainous regions that used to be used, but it's long since fallen into a really sorry state of disrepair, totally overgrown, super washed out, lots of landslides. And so we've been working to build a new route that's actually sustainable and will last for a long time. That's an ongoing project. But it does mean that when you finally get through this really thick overgrowth and make it all the way to our trail crew camp on the other side, if it happens to be August, you will be warmly welcomed by a bunch of TCT volunteers who will be very impressed that you made it all the way. And outside of those months, at the very least, you'll suddenly stumble on a brand new trail that will feel very satisfying after what you've just bushwhacked through. After we go through that section, we start to hit some of the more well-developed sections of the TCT. And if you've seen, our website, if you've looked at photos of the trail, there's a very high chance that a lot of the photos you've seen have been from this section of Upper Svaneti. This includes one of the most popular trails in all of Georgia, which goes from the regional capital of Mestia over to the small hamlet of Ushguli. Most people do it as a 4-day trek. And so if you've come this whole way from the southern border of Armenia, you're going to have a bit of a system shock with suddenly seeing other hikers. But with, the sudden influx of people also means very nice guest houses to stay at, good hot local food, and plenty of takeaway khachapuri or cheese bread to pack in your backpack for the days onward. Now we're getting towards the end. We'll go all the way through the rest of Svaneti, that high mountain region of Western Georgia, and make our way down to the Tobovarchili Lakes, which is really an alpine gem of the Samegrelo region. This means the Silver Lakes, and there's a whole series of them, and it's quickly become one of many TCT hikers' favorite spots, just because it's so beautiful and rugged. Right along in hands with that, the trail conditions aren't the best, but it's also becoming a more popular trail, and so it's slowly improving year on year just due to the foot traffic. And finally, a bit of a marathon. You're going to make your way all to the Black Sea and enjoy that long-awaited swim, hopefully. Here, we're going to traverse some of the lowlands as we come down through the mountains. You've got a lot of jeep tracks, some road walks, random things like cool Soviet resorts, great hospitality in the villages, because it is very uncommon to see people, particularly foreigners, walking through with big backpacks. And so almost certainly you'll get curious looks and some invitations. And then you get to end with a dip in the sea, maybe even at sunset for a nice dramatic end to your journey. So that's the overview of what we're looking at when we talk about the through hiking route. That's a 15-minute journey through the Caucasus. And I hope that helped illuminate a little bit of the sections. But now that we've done that, I want to turn it over to you guys, because this is designed to be a hiker-friendly call. We want to make sure it's useful for you. We want to make sure we're answering your questions. And we've got the best people in the world here to help you do that. So we can go through, I guess first, I just want to open it up to the audience to see what's coming up for folks, immediately just as we were talking. And then we've also got a couple different topics that we're ready to run through, covering different subjects. But open call if anyone wants to drop a question in the chat real quick before we start moving on and just giving some summaries. All right, we've got a question about food storage from Sonia. Hi, Sonia. And I'm going to put this over to you guys. Did any of you bring food lockers or bear-resistant food containers in Armenia?
I did not. I don't actually know anybody who did. I think the bears are quite scared of humans in this part of the world. So anecdotally, it's not something you have to worry about. I've also hiked in areas in the US where you have to use them, and I felt safe not using them in Armenia or Georgia.
Yeah, I think I can second what Harry said. I did bring for my second hike in Georgia last year, I did bring some of those odor-proof, like the sealant bag to, at least feel like I'm doing something to reduce the risk of having bears smell my food. But generally, yeah, because it's so, it's not a very well-traveled route, so there's barely any hikers, and you will probably see bears or tracks of bears, but they're usually very far away and very shy of hikers. So it's not yet a problem. So at the moment, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. The bears do tend to be very scared of humans. However, I just want to note, with my long-term view on, we really want to make sure that it stays that way. So just as you're thinking about your bear strategies, I mean, I'm sure this is a very well-prepared group of people on this call, but just take some basic precautions. Think twice before, sleeping with your food. I know that's a whole raging debate. But keep the odor in mind. There's a few hotspots on the trail where we do know that bear activity is more common. Those are primarily the area I mentioned around Horse, which is just south of the Gegan Mountains. I would say the area around like Borjomi in Georgia, those central forests, and Racha, particularly Upper Racha, where there's just very, very little traffic. So those are the areas where you might want to be particularly careful about odor management, whether that's having some kind of odor-proof bag or camping at, cooking like a safe distance away from your tents, and considering keeping your food, away from where you're sleeping. All right. Oh, this is good. We've got a bunch of questions to go through. All right. Can you talk about availability of fuel for stoves? One of you want to take that one?
I'm happy to. So I checked with Megan earlier. You will be given access to the Armenia guide written by Tom Allen, which has detailed information about that, which I think is also valid for Georgia. So if I remember rightly, the general advice is to try and get an alcohol burning stove, because that's really easy to buy in nearly any small, just village shop even. Pharmacy is the best bet, but any small village shop, they'll have it. They'll sell it by whatever volume you ask for. For other fuel types, like canisters that you might have a stove that screws onto, it's not so easy to resupply. So I wouldn't recommend that. Megan, or would?
Maybe
Yeah,
I can
no, I think
add on. I think I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but I did it only with gas canisters. So it is possible, but it is logistically not super easy. You can buy gas canisters in the capitals for sure. Even there, it's difficult. I think in Tbilisi there are like 2 stores that stocks them, and you have to know which of them. Same in Yerevan. I think there's 1 store. At least when I was there 6 years ago, it was 1 store that has them. And my strategy was to just buy enough basically for the entire 40 days, and I didn't cook very much. So I bought like 2 of the medium-sized canister and made them last. It's one strategy. I think there's also ways where you can like go back to, try to like hitch back to the capital, but that's logistically, it's possible, but I wouldn't super recommend it. But if you do the sectional hikes or just do Armenia, for example, I think it's possible if you don't cook a lot to get away with like 1 medium-sized fuel canister with gas.
Yeah, definitely if you're doing section hikes, it's a lot more manageable. Other than that, you're either sorting out your own pretty complicated resupply strategy with mailing, or you want to be looking at an alcohol stove, or there are some attachments that you can buy that will thread onto the top of UTC gas canisters that will then allow you to use, I think, I'm kind of blanking on what it is, but like the basically general, you'll see these like long gas canisters that they sell in hardware shops. And those are also relatively common throughout the region. You won't find them in villages, but you would find them in the bigger towns with the supermarkets where you're doing your other resupplies. So, follow-up question to that, someone asked if open fires are legal. They are, for better or for worse, there is very little regulation in the Caucasus. So that means the onus is on you to like, please don't be an idiot. But also probably you won't. You will pretty commonly see people having, bonfires, barbecuing, that sort of thing. And if you do, it's usually a pretty good party to join. But definitely be mindful of just general principles of like where you're having it, making sure that you have a good firing set up, and being mindful of wildfire risk, because there is pretty limited capacity on the grounds to like predict those risks as well as to respond to it. And for example, in Arvik National Park down at the far south of Armenia, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, there was a really large wildfire that wiped out, basically all of this beautiful old growth juniper forest along the trail. And so it's rare. We're not dealing with the same type of fire season that many of the long distance trails in the US are, but it is still a risk. So just be mindful. I think that's a good, let's see. There's a nice tie-in to resupply strategies. Longest stretch between resupplies, how often can you resupply? So this is basically a little summary of what a typical village shop looks like. This is just, some lovely guy's shop in Georgia. And I think it's a pretty good rundown of what you usually see in these, maybe even a little well-stocked. You've got, some basic sausage, you've got a lot of candy, a lot of alcohol, a lot of instant coffee packets, probably some noodles, maybe some buckwheat, and not too much else. So, these are good for top-ups along the way. If you go into the interactive maps that we put together, you can really zoom in and see where pretty much all of the little village shops that we know of are labeled. And so you can get a sense of like, basically, how often can you get an ice cream along the trail, which is a very important question. But in terms of bigger resupplies, we've designed the new maps to be broken up into sections that are basically divided by bigger resupply. And so that's where you'll have access to a supermarket, even if it's a relatively small one, but that has all of like the core essentials that you would need. Typically has a pharmacy. And yeah, those have a much wider selection ranging from like, hiker classics like ramen to, nuts and dried fruit that you can get. Sometimes lentils, buckwheats, a lot of good hearty trail classics. What about you guys? What were your favorite trail meals along the way or resupply recommendations?
So I got given an unexpected amount of food by generous shepherds and things like that. So I always ended up having slightly more food than I needed. What again, bring up Tom's guide. It has good notes on food. And yeah, for me, my favorite, my sort of meal schedule was oats with condensed milk in the morning, which was a bit of a luxury because condensed milk isn't fully dried, so it's quite heavy. Lunch, I would have the fresh bread. I've forgotten the name for it.
Lavash.
Lavash, yeah, freshly baked bread, and that was good for a couple of days. Then it goes moldy with honey or marmalade. And dinner, I'd have the buckwheat with a stock cube and maybe some dried sausage, and that was reliably obtainable in all the village shops. Those 3 meals, except maybe the fresh bread.
Yeah. For all the true hikers coming from the US, Snickers are available in most of the small village stores even. It definitely happened that I think I've bought out the entire Snickers supply of some of these small village stores when I like needed to resupply for like a longer section. But yeah, like stuff like chocolates and dried fruits and the unhealthy stuff like chips, the salty stuff, salted nuts, that's basically available area. And for me, that makes out most of my calories throughout the day. And then, yeah, just oats in the morning and ramen or buckwheat or something in the evening, and then I'm set.
Yeah.
In Armenia, also in the larger villages, they tend to have bakeries. So they make things like pigs in a blanket or hot dogs, and I'd buy like 10 of those at a time. So those are also another really great option.
Yeah, big fan of the fresh lavash and the kada, like the sweet Armenian pastries. Those are an absolute bomb and perfect for a hike. Just be careful with the gas station food. If you're seeing something, especially if it's meat sitting out at a bakery, you might want to think twice about that. I've had a couple rough incidents myself, but the hiker hope is so strong when you're hungry. It's hard to resist, but be careful.
It's also worth mentioning that most people will stay at guest houses at least some of the time. And the food at the guest houses is really one of the nicest experiences of the whole TCT, because nearly everybody has their own garden. So it's all fresh, fresh micro local. So even if you're on a budget, try to get some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the food is great. They'll usually send you off with plenty of extra. And it's also a really wonderful way to meet people, have some chats about what's happening in their area. Oftentimes, if you don't speak any Armenian or Georgian, just in case, or any Russian, it can be more difficult to communicate. But these days, more and more young people are learning English as well. Some people know, German from having spent time over there, or, other assorted languages, because more and more people are going to Europe to work and then come back. And so there's a very strong attitude a lot of the time of like people are curious, they want to talk to you, and it's a not uncommon experience to be chatting with someone and then suddenly they pull out their phone, you know, they're calling someone and then they say, "Hey, it's my son, he speaks English, talk to him." And you pull up the phone and you're like, "Hello?" And usually they just want to have a little chat. It's pretty sweet. You should do it.
Oh, maybe, and one thing to add on the resupply / guest house topic is that I've done that, I think, on my last hike, because we planned on having a shop in a village, but it was closed for some reason, and we were out of food. So we just asked at a guest house if they would, you know, have some food. And the only thing the owner did was pull out her Google Translate that said, "I will feed you," made us sit down, gave us like the biggest table full of food. It was delicious. And then, yeah, like we could pack some of the food out. It was good for like a 2-3 day resupply for us until we got to the next village. So that's also an option. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great strategy. Someone asked about the longest stretch before a resupply. I'm pretty sure that is through the Gegam Mountains in Armenia, which is about 120, 30 kilometers between like village to village. It's pretty open, so you know you can cruise. You'll also interact or at least encounter several of the shepherds along the way. So maybe we can chat about that really quick. A lot of them have these very big, scary shepherd dogs, and they're very territorial. So you do want to be mindful about approaching them. The best strategy is usually to either do a really big detour around so that you know, stay well out of their territory, or if you see them coming to you, to really try to approach the tent as quickly as possible, flag down the shepherd, say, "Hello, I'm a human," and they'll call off the dog. In almost all cases, that works fine, although it is always a little bit of a stressful, hair-raising experience. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that. I kind of got on that train because I was going to say often they will also invite you in and try to give you cheese and things. And if you ever get stuck in an emergency up there, they absolutely will help you out. But it's not something that you should rely on because, you know, these guys are really self-sufficient. They have to take all of their food up from the lowlands and, you know, manage all summer. And so, you know, it can be a great experience to chat with them. But like, try not to take much food or water unless you really need it.
Yes, I think for the shepherd dogs to add on, yeah, like I think just having hiking poles really helps, doing like the, you know, looking big, looking impressive, that usually scares the dog away, because often it happens that you see the dogs or the dogs come towards you way before you even like see the camp or where you like actually prepared for it. At least that's what happened for me. I think now it's a bit better because the locations of the camps are better mapped, so you can kind of, you know, when you know you're getting in the vicinity of a shepherd camp, you know, just keep your eyes open for shepherd dogs. I think that really helps to have that as a trail now. So we have the information now. Just when I hiked the route, that wasn't a thing. Yeah, and like worst case, do the thing where you pretend to, you know, throw rock. Ideally, don't throw them, but you know, or just yell at the dogs. And yeah, usually the dogs are used to a pretty rough, you know, being treated fairly roughly. So if you just sound a bit more angry than you would usually want to do with a dog, that's a good way to get them under control, just in case they. But most of the dogs are really friendly. At least that was my experience. So it's okay.
I can maybe also add about sheepdogs. I think, I mean, it was one of the things that I was really nervous about before going on the trail, and I think, I mean, across the trail there's different sections, right? Like there's some sections that are used more by shepherds, and you'll know about that in advance, and you'll know to expect them. I will say that as I wrote in a comment in the chat, I relied really heavily on a dog whistle, and I carried both like pepper spray and bear spray on the trail, and I used the whistle a lot. I think, yeah, it just gave some sort of peace of mind. I will say that the whistle worked better on larger dogs, which is a good thing, I think. There was one tiny dog that like was really it just kept running after me, and it didn't do it, like it didn't react to the whistle at all. And you can buy those in Yerevan. But I will say that you should be prepared for those situations, and kind of like know that sometimes there are several dogs as well, also in sections that maybe the shepherd isn't there right away, or it's really foggy. Like, not to scare anyone, but there was a section where I was in the fog and I saw what I thought was like a small cow, but it was actually a dog. But I think as soon as the shepherd sees that you're there, they'll come over and like calm the dog down. So it's just about like trying to make like eye contact or whatever with the shepherd who is around, and trying to see where they are, because the dog can be a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, that's good advice. Definitely, yeah, the whistle was I was amazed at how well that worked when we were together. Plus having some pepper spray or bear spray on hand as a backup and trekking poles to keep them at a distance can be effective. Basically, you're buying time until the shepherd arrives, and continue trying to move like sort of slowly away from the camp or parallel to it, not coming any closer. I do want to add a couple notes on other, TCT specific hazards before we move on, because now we're on this lovely slide. And someone also asked about river crossings, which in my opinion is one of the other biggest risks of the trail, since there are sections where there are river crossings, and just like anywhere in the world, those water levels can be really highly fluctuating. And sometimes even if there has been a bridge, the bridge will get washed out with the heavy snow melt that comes earlier in the summer. So this, for example, someone asked about river crossings in Upper Swaneti, Georgia in early August. Here in the center, we have a picture of a river crossing in Upper Swaneti in early August. This is one of the most famous rivers on the trail because this is the part where locals from the village of Adishi will take horses and ferry hikers back and forth across the river on their horses. Now, a lot of hikers don't want to do that. They think, oh, that's no problem. I can cross the river by myself. I'm very experienced. It doesn't look too bad. To which I would just say, assess the river, see if you can find a good spot. And if you're in doubt, just take the horse. I've seen people be on kind of the close to the wrong side of making that judgment call. I've been on close to the wrong side of it myself. And you're supporting the local economy. So, plus it's kind of a cool experience. There will never be a bridge built over that river because now people are used to taking tourists across on horseback, but what can you do? I think that's really like that river in particular is the biggest hazard. There are other ones where TCT has built bridges over them, or there are older bridges existing. So the ones that we've built have occasionally been washed out earlier in the season. Those aren't as fast or deep as this river, but again, basically it should be fine, especially by early August when the water levels are typically lower than late June and early July, which is when the bulk of snowmelt happens. But just use your best judgment and don't be afraid to turn back or camp beside the river and wait for it to be lower in the morning if necessary. Other big hazards, thunderstorms can be quite intense in the Caucasus. There's a lot of lightning. They can be quite scary. So just practice kind of good campsite selection. There's really not too much you can do about it other than watching the weather forecast, which I have to admit is not the best in the region, and thinking really carefully about where you're putting your tent. Another thing to keep an eye out for, which unfortunately I didn't put a photo of on this slide, is the plant's giant hogweed. Just Google it. It's like this dystopian looking giant plant with these rather picturesque white flowers. What this plant will do is if you get its like juice or sap from the inside on your skin, it strips your skin of its ability to protect itself from sunlight. And so the combination of like broken hogweed, branches that then you get on your bare arm or skin, plus being exposed to sunlight can mean really, really nasty burns. So that's it's a good practice in general to kind of cover your legs and arms, but especially because of the hogweed. We've all had the hogweed burns. They're not nice. You should avoid them if you can. And it's quite common because unfortunately it grows really well in parts of the earth that have been disturbed. So, old trails or riverbanks, they're pretty prime conditions. It is native to the Caucasus, actually. It's invasive in several other parts of the world, but it's from here. So, got to learn how to deal with it. We've chatted about dogs. And then lastly, I just want to add a note about people, because the people are one of the best parts of the trail, and you will almost certainly encounter amazing local hospitality and meet some really cool folks doing cool, interesting stuff in the tourism space, and people who are curious about you. But just like anywhere in the world, interactions with people can also go sideways. This is particularly true for female hikers, although it can happen to anyone. We get a lot of questions from folks asking, is it safe as a solo female to go hike the TCT? And I want to be very straightforward that that is a mixed bag. I hike by myself here, but I avoid it when I can. And pretty much every solo female hiker I've talked to has had at least one dicey experience, if not one that's like outright bad. And I don't want to shy around from that because I think it's really important to prepare for. So carrying something like pepper spray can help a lot. And just sort of having your risk assessment up, knowing that it can be a risk, keeping your wits about you, and being careful about what types of invitations you accept. You might want to think twice about going into the shepherd hut when it's just you and like he's clearly the only person around for miles, versus when you meet a family and they're inviting you in. Just statistically tends to skew one way. So I don't want to belabor that point too much here, but I will say if you have any questions about that, I'm really happy to chat with people one-on-one. So you can feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Maybe to add on that, thanks, Megan. You put it very, very correctly. I think I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I think maybe I hiked most of my kilometers in the Caucasus alone. It was a great experience, but I also think I really wouldn't recommend it, just because, not because, I don't know. I mean, everyone should decide by themselves, but I personally felt, and yeah, I did hike 3 weeks with a friend, and the rest I hiked with by myself, and it was a lot more fun hiking with my friend, just because I felt significantly more safe, female friend. So that just takes away that whole layer of worrying about one's safety, having company. And usually I'm a person that prefers hiking solo, but it's definitely something to consider, because even if nothing happens, I feel like there's a lot of situation that did feel where I felt uneasy, and that just is somewhat unnecessary stress.
Yeah. In general, obviously solo through hiking is pretty popular, but just due to the remoteness of a lot of these places, I mean, in general, I would advise going with someone if you can. Also because the trail is still quite new, and we can get into this a little bit, but you probably won't encounter many other hikers. And so you're not going to have the same type of like trail family experience that you might have along the way, although you can meet cool people like Leia I met because she hikes the TCT. And we can do some of that connecting virtually, but you're pretty unlikely to run into someone who's going kind of along the same route and at the same pace as you. So if you want to have company along the trail, you're better off bringing it with you for now. Okay, I wanted to chat a little bit about seasonality. Had a question about northbound versus southbound, as well as water. So this kind of relates to both of them. Just in general, when we're thinking about what's the best season to through hike, we're looking at starting mid-May in southern Armenia, finishing on the north coast of Georgia no later than early October, or southbound starting in early July in Georgia and finishing in like November in Armenia. So really the direction that you choose to hike is kind of dependent on your season and just on your preference. They're both, I think, really cool, diverse directions. We've had people do it both ways. They're both pretty demanding because in both sections, you start off with a pretty huge climb nearly right off the bat. So there's no getting around that. If you want an easier way to do it, you should flip-flop and start at the northern Armenia border and hike south, and then go back up to the border with Georgia and then hike north. And that would be like an ideal way to get your trail legs and kind of ease into the experience. But if you're looking to do a continuous through hike, honestly, I don't really have a recommendation for you. It's totally up to personal preference. Harry, maybe you want to comment on that a little bit?
I agree with you. I went northbound because I was nervous that 3 months wouldn't be long enough. So I wanted to choose the direction where I could start earlier in the season. But as it happened, the time constraint didn't turn out to be that important. So I think it would have worked in either direction. I don't like the faff of the flip-flopping option, but I think it's down to personal preference, really.
Yeah, and just one note on the someone asked about water sources. That will get a little trickier if you're going southbound, since many of the sources that are seasonal will tend to dry up by like midsummer, so late July, August. That can be a particular issue in southern Armenia. So the couple desert sections that I mentioned at the start, both Arvik National Park, way down in the south, and then the areas around like Noravank Monastery are both pretty well-known drier sections. In general, there's very few places on the TCT where you would have to carry more than like a day's worth of water, where you would be forced to dry camp and carry your next load. But if you're going late in the season, that might be something you have to look out for, just depending on your distance, how far you're making it in a day, and whether or not the sources that are ahead of you are reliable. We've tried to be, have as much detail as we can provide in the trail notes that list whether sources are consistent or seasonal, but particularly something seasonal, if it's late in the season, do not count on it. And even when things are marked as more stable, it's generally a good idea to just plan for whatever your next source is to be dry, since there's a lot of different things that could disrupt that. And it's a bad idea, bad situation when you end up out of water.
And I would encourage people to use the Slack to post in the trail conditions if you find that a spring is dry or flowing, because it really helps other people. And yes, the level of detail in the CalTopo map and the trail notes makes it possible to plan water quite carefully. I remember thinking, oh, I need 1.2 liters for this next stretch. I got it down to a fine art, but only because I knew someone had been by the day before and they confirmed that there was a water source that was still flowing. So do try to contribute to that if you've got signal.
Yeah, I'll chat a little bit about the Slack forum and our hiker support resources. Well, we are getting towards the end. It's gone fast. But I'm happy to hang on a little longer for anyone who wants to stay in chats. A couple of quick notes on navigation that I just think are really important to highlight. Most of the trail is still unmarked, and a lot of it needs maintenance. We are doing as much as we can with the TCTA and with our local trail crews, but we are super limited by the funding that's available. And especially since this year, unfortunately, we had a really big funding cut due to the US funding freeze. That's meant that our ability to respond to trail conditions on the ground and do the maintenance that we planned has been super limited. So you really do need to be prepared for rough trail conditions, and you have to be prepared to use your GPS to navigate. This is oftentimes like the biggest psychological switch coming from a place with more established trails, because even on the clearer sections of trail where you think you're going along the right way, oftentimes there's intersecting animal paths or jeep tracks, and it can be really easy to accidentally wind up, 2 kilometers down the wrong road if you're not paying attention to your GPS track and checking it regularly. So it's not ideal, but it is where we're at now. One of our medium-term goals is to blaze the whole routes, and if you want to help us do that, you can help us fundraise. So yeah, someone asked about water as well. You'll see a lot of these types of sources, these sort of built up springs. Quick note about water safety. These types of built-in springs are generally safe to drink without filtering. They're piped directly from the ground. They're the village water sources. You'll also see some natural springs bubbling straight from the ground. Those are usually safe, but you should check the surroundings and make sure that it's clean, that there's no livestock around. You will also find some mineral springs, which are natural, fizzy mineral water. Those are amazing. They're one of the best parts of the trail, in my humble opinion. So you can go mineral water hunting. But for everything else, you want to filter because there is so much livestock everywhere in the Caucasus that you just really don't want to mess around with that.
And don't be like me for the water sources and make the same mistake as we had in a village where there was a mineral water source, someone offering us, to like pour with the community bucket some of the mineral water, which ended up in giving me and my hiking partner really bad diarrhea that ended our hike. So don't recommend that. Just take your own clean water bottles for that.
Yeah, the water is usually good, but the community cups are not necessarily to be trusted.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we wanted to be polite and didn't want to say anything, but maybe at this point it would have been better to not be polite, but healthy.
Yeah.
I think just to add very quickly, I used a Ketadin water filter bottle, which was amazing. And if you're carrying multiple bottles, I mean, it's not cheap. It's like 30 pounds. I don't know what that is in other currency, but you put it in, it doesn't have to sit and wait, and you can just like squeeze it directly into other bottles already filtered. So used a lot of that, but don't make the mistake that I made with Megan and leave water bottles at the water source.
Oh no, that's
You're going
right.
into the geckos.
Yeah.
I lost like a liter of water storage. It's not great.
Happens to the best of us. Okay, other couple quick notes about just general permits, borders, and bureaucracy. So permits for national parks. There are a couple places where you need this. It's not a lot, but there is a process to go through. All of that information is available in our Thru-Hiker forum, but basically there's 2 national parks in Armenia that you need to register in advance by filling out a Google form. And there's 1 national park in Georgia that you need to register by visiting the ranger station. There's also the border zones, as I mentioned earlier. The ones where you need to register for that are in northern Georgia, where you're getting close to the Russian border and going into the border zone. Here in the center, we have pictured our friendly border guard station in Zeskho, who have become, friends and champions of the TCT in the many years that we've been working on that part of the trail. They're getting pretty used to seeing hikers, but you do still need to be prepared for that process to take potentially a couple hours, since they have to make calls to TBC, they do other mysterious things. I have no idea why it takes this long, but it is the Caucasus and you cannot fight it, so you have to just roll with it. Another important border thing to keep in mind is the ongoing situation with the southern border in Armenia. Many of you may have heard about the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh that escalated again in 2023 with Azerbaijan taking that territory and the ethnic Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh fleeing into Armenia. So that southern border has been, a continual point of tension over the last 30 years. It's gotten, I would definitely more contentious over the past 5 years with the war in 2020 and then some upflarings of conflict since then. It is an area to keep a close eye on. What we have done in response to that is reroute the trail further away from the border. There used to be a section going up to the town of Jermuk that we've removed not because anyone had any unsafe incidents, but because there was an increasingly heightened military presence there. And so people were getting questions, it's a little suspicious when people come through walking with big backpacks. And not only is that a nice experience for the hikers, it's not a nice experience for the guys who are posted there because suddenly they have all of this weird administration to do from a random hiker who came through instead of worrying about their job. So we don't want to keep on doing that. And in general, it seems like a better idea to reroute it. So the day-to-day experience on the trail is, I would say, quite safe, and it would be surprising if you encounter much military presence along the trail, but if you do, let us know, since it's always possible that changes. Don't take any photos of, military stations or, record specific GPS points or anything like that, because that is not the type of information that anyone wants to be sharing. But generally, people are very friendly. Just in general, the Caucasus are often very, very safe on a person-to-person basis, but it is a rather geopolitically complicated region. There's always a small chance that something could escalate or go sideways. And so we really just encourage you to keep an eye on the local news. We've got, again, some recommendations for sites to watch out for in the Slack channel. And if it's relevant for you, register with your local embassy and make sure you're signed up for their travel alerts and register with them so that they know where you are. Other than that, again, generally, people hike it, people live there, it's fine. But just, do your own risk assessment because that will be different for everyone. Yeah. Someone else asked about emergency services. Yeah, there is also no such thing as a full-fledged search and emergency rescue service, but there is a pretty good grassroots system of, figuring out who to call to eventually get someone out to help you. It probably won't be a helicopter. It will probably be a guy in a 4x4 or a guy on a horse. But one of the nice things about hiking in this part of the world is even though you feel very remote, you're usually not too far from a road, which makes it relatively easy to get someone out to help you, with a couple exceptions, like some of the deep backcountry areas in northern Georgia where that would be a much longer endeavor. In general, I think it's a great idea to carry something like a personal locator beacon or a Garmin InReach with messaging capability just as a backup. I have confirmed that, those work because once I got a call from the Garmin services because a hiker who got in a bad situation at Arvik National Park had given them my number to, contact for route information and for connections to the local national park. And so together with this patchwork, they were actually able to dispatch someone the same night and evacuate her, which was amazingly fast given the circumstances. But in general, just be prepared to sit tight and wait for a night if possible. But almost always, as long as you can get some communication out through whatever channel that is, people will figure out some way to get to you and help. Okay, lots of questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through.
I think one small one is Russian spoken everywhere. I think the answer is most people older than about 35 will speak Russian, but not everyone. In the more rural areas, no. And younger people, no, but they're more likely to speak English. That was a question from John.
Yeah. Or more likely to be comfortable using Google Translate. Also really useful.
Yes, I met one guy an older guy, and I don't think he'd ever used a smartphone before. And he typed out in Armenian and it translated. It said, "Thank you for teaching me to speak," which was probably not accurate, but very sweet.
Oh, it's adorable.
Yeah, definitely recommend the Google Translate where you can talk to. So just hold if you have service, which and actually surprisingly many places where you meet people, you do have phone service. Just hold it in front of people's faces, let them talk to it, and it's really good to just have conversations, even if you don't share a language. Use that a lot, and it was really helpful.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure with Google Translate, you can also download languages for offline use. This is a really awesome capability that you should definitely take advantage of. Okay, I wanted to add a couple quick notes on gear, mostly just the fact that you're not very likely to get good gear replacements in the region. So no matter how light you think you want to go, I would just kind of encourage you to err on the side of a little bit sturdier rather than ultralights, because if your ultralight stuff rips or breaks, you are not getting a replacement in Georgia. You are getting something that, is much older, much heavier, and may or may not fit you well. I know, Harry, you had like a shoe incident, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, shoegate. That would be, someone asked about mistakes and learning experiences. For me, it was that I didn't think about shoe replacement and suffered as a consequence. Yeah, and maybe think about your repair kit. I definitely use dental floss to stitch up my hiking trousers, so maybe try and avoid that as well.
Yeah, definitely the kind of trail where you want a solid repair kit. Because if things break, and even if you get something, it means going back probably to the capital, which is can be a several days trip, depending on where you are, getting back out on the trail. So yeah, if that's avoidable, bring backups and know how to repair your gear.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main thing. There's some gear shops in the capitals if you get desperate. And they're getting, better over time, but still pretty limited compared to international options. Okay, let's see. I guess last core couple things. I just want to briefly go over the ways that, we from the TCTA are working to support hikers. And so all of the resources that you can take advantage of as you're planning your trip. First and foremost, make sure to check out our website. If you're here, probably you've been on our website, but we have a lot of free online trail notes and planning resources that we're working very hard to keep up to date and continue adding to. We've just launched our Trailblazers forum for the year. So this is our Slack channel where we gather people who are attempting a long distance hike on the TCT and have a place for them to discuss, share notes, info about waypoints that they've encountered. So info on trail conditions, a good campsite, gear recommendations, asking questions, getting those sorts of updates. It's been, I guess you guys can speak to that a little bit more than me because you actually used it. But for us, it's also been an amazing way to get up-to-date info on the trail and, to connect with hikers themselves. Yeah, maybe if you guys want to chat, say something about like, what was your experience using that and yeah, recommendations for hikers.
Yeah. Well, when I first hiked, it didn't exist, and I really wished it would have existed because there was no one that had hiked the route before, and I felt very lost. And then when I went back last year and discovered the ISTA Slack channel, it was really cool to see the amount of information gathered. And yeah, so we're all trying to be on there, answer your questions. If you have any, we will monitor it. You can, yeah, ideally post it publicly. If you have very specific questions, you can message us directly, but the idea is to keep collecting the information there. So like future hikers can probably have similar questions. So yeah, they can see the answers and use this resource. So yeah, recommend to read to the answers. And yeah, I feel like a lot of the questions that people have been answered on there before. So I think it's quite a cool resource to have.
Yeah, we're always happy to re-answer, but there's a lot you can find using the search bar because now we've got data going all the way back to 2022. So
yeah, I think just to agree with that, it's so useful. I would just add that when you actually go on the trail and experience things, it's also helpful if you have time to go back and add information. So not just like the questions, but then also there's so much knowledge from previous years, even if it's like after a certain section, just to say like, hey, look out for this, or this changed since, someone posted something else in the forum, just to keep the knowledge updated, I think is helpful.
yeah,
maybe one quick thing to add on, because likely unless you go for like the shorter, more popular route sections, there's a high chance you won't be seeing many other hikers out on the trail. So I think it's a really good way to be in touch and yeah, maybe organize, if you know that someone is kind of hiking a day or two ahead of you, maybe you can figure out a way to meet up, or just kind of like have a bit of a trail community feeling, because hiking out there, it can happen. And as the trail gets more popular, it definitely will happen that you'll pass more and more hikers, which is always amazing. I was really happy to pass my first other TCT hiker last year. When I went back, it was like the most exciting moment to like not be a crazy person that walks across the Caucasus, but actually be hiking on a trail and see other hikers. That was really cool. So yeah, it's a good way to, yeah, kind of have the TCT community, even though virtually. Yeah.
Yeah, and then one other resource that we have is one of the TCT's co-founders, Tom, has spent actually the last several years working on a guidebook to the trail. But because it's still a draft, what we've been doing is offering this for free to hikers who are part of the Trailblazers Forum in exchange, hopefully for a little bit of feedback and your help updating with notes from the trail conditions as you're on there. But we'll be launching the new version of that quite soon. There's a whole detailed section on planning and preparation and cultural info, all the food, and then as well as detailed trail notes for each section with cultural notes about what you'll be seeing and experiencing along the trail. So he's put an amazing amount of work into it, and it just keeps getting better and better. We're not publishing it, officially yet in any capacity. So we're happy to offer it again for free to hikers this year. So we hope that you'll take advantage of it and tell us what you think. And then, of course, we're also working to do trail building and maintenance, funding dependence, as well as volunteer dependence. So we're running volunteer programs every summer to get people out building trails in the Caucasus and continuing to open up more parts of these amazing historical trails so that they can be used and loved as they should be, because they're amazing, spectacular areas. And lastly, a couple notes about how you guys can support the TCT if you think this is a cool project and you want to be part of it. So first of all, we really encourage you to donate if you can and become a member. I think it's a great way to support the forum if you're finding that useful, because there's a ton of time that goes into compiling those resources, and we're continually trying to improve them and provide the best experience that we can. We have an upcoming hike-a-thon in May that we've just announced. So this is our first kind of crowdfunding style fundraising event. So if you want to participate, we'll be sharing more information about that shortly. The idea is it'll be a really fun, easy way to raise awareness of the trail and kind of contribute within your own community. Second, when you're actually on the trail, like Harry and Leah and Katya were saying, especially if you are benefiting from the types of data that other people have shared, if you can take good data from the trail and post it in the Slack forum or share it with us, that helps a ton. Because at this point, when you look at the thru-hiking maps, which you'll see have hundreds and hundreds of waypoints on there, a lot of that has been hiker sourced. The updates on the water sources and conditions, many of the good campsites, fun cultural monuments that, maybe we had missed and then people walk by and discover and dig into a little bit more. So you can be part of helping build out that information network for future hikers. Also, we really would love you to spread the word, because not that many people know about the TCT yet. And as it gets more popular and more established, we're trying to grow, the community of hikers, get more folks on the trail, get more folks learning about the Caucasus for some of the positive reasons rather than the negative reasons that you often hear about in the news. So please post about your hike and tag us. We'd love to see what you're doing. We'd love to reshare it. It actually does, help spread the word about the trail a lot. And we also have a bunch of different volunteer opportunities. So if you're sitting at home and you're not able to make it out to the trail this year, we've got virtual volunteering opportunities available on our website. We have in-person opportunities to join trail crews, which are tons of fun. And if you do go and do a long hike and you're excited and you want to contribute afterwards, then you should consider joining our brand new Hikers Board, which these hikers here are part of, which is a way that we're building a community of trail alumni to help, continue promoting and sustaining and helping future hikers out along the TCT. And if you really want to seriously help shape the future of the TCT, you should think about joining our board of directors. We are always interested in hearing from folks who are interested in contributing and supporting us in that way. Yeah, I know there's still more questions. I do want to kind of wrap up here real quick, but I'm going to do a quick scan through the chats. But I also just want to say a big thank you for joining us. We really, really hope that we'll see you on the trail, and it will make our trail crews very happy to see more hikers out there. It's been fun. I saw one question about, I don't know if that person is still here, but if TCT is organizing or offering section support or contracting with local guiding companies to help create a plan. Actually, this is a really cool question because we are just getting ready to launch some new trekking support services. We're going to start offering consultation services for people who want one-on-one chats to help plan their itineraries and to talk through questions, as well as personalized itinerary creation, some types of support for your own treks with logistics support on the ground, and private guided group treks in addition to the bigger group treks that we run every summer. So keep an eye out for that. But if you're interested in starting something immediately, you can feel free to get in touch with us. Oh, that was a lot. I'm tired of talking. Does anyone have any last questions? Feel free to just come off mute and ask, because it's going to be hard for me to really quickly scan through all of those to find them.
Megan, I was
Yeah.
trying to keep track, so I think there are a couple that we missed. So quickly, I think you talked about dangerous things, but did you talk about vipers?
Oh, I mentioned
Bjorn?
the vipers,
You did
but
mention the
not
vipers.
how to deal with them, which is
that was Bjorn's question.
okay. Good question. I was also a viper newbie before hiking the southern part of the TCT. I've never hiked in snake territory before, so it was a little jarring when I saw one for the first time. Couple things to know about those. I mean, basically, you want to make some noise while you're walking. That will often alert them. Trekking poles can be great for that. This is going to sound ridiculous and obvious, but it is worth saying, like, just be careful when you're sitting in shading places about where you put your feet and your hands. You really want to check that carefully, because especially in the heat of the day, these are the southern areas where it can get quite hot. They'll often be curled up in those shady little nooks. So look twice before putting your extremities anywhere. And just kind of keep your eyes sharp. The last specific TCT thing I'll say about that is, like you may have seen, or like I may have mentioned, there's a lot of livestock. There's tons of cows all over the trail. And I learned the hard way that when you are finishing up a long day of hiking and the sun is setting and you're dead and you just want to get to your campsite and you're used to navigating around cows all the time, that a curled up viper on a rock will look very, very similar to a pile of cow dung. So keep your eyes sharp, keep your distance. Don't let it fool you. It may or may not be a pile of cow dung.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Laura, hi.
Hi, I just had one question about the materials that you mentioned, the book and the Slack. Where do we find the information to get access to that?
Yeah, I'll drop, actually, maybe if one of you guys can drop a link in the chats, I'll send them out as like a follow-up to everyone who registered, but it's all available on our website on the TCT Trailblazers page. So basically there's like a short Google form that we ask you to fill out, which is basically like a bit of just question checks about like, these are some of the things you'll probably encounter on the TCT. How well prepared are you for that? It's not a gatekeeping, it's more of like a self-reflection exercise. And then some things to sign, like, please don't sue us if the trail conditions are bad. Like, we did try to be very clear. And then you'll get an automatic email with a link to join the Slack forum and some instructions about how to navigate that. So, yeah.
Thank you so
we'd love
much.
to have you. Yeah, thanks for joining. Okay, any last questions before we wrap up? Again, feel free to just come off mute, or Harry, if there's anything else I missed.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, I'm Don. Myself and my partner and another person, we're starting May 20th on a northbound hike. And we were
Awesome.
wondering, has anybody mailed anything in Georgia, but to a Georgian post office, like from Tbilisi to be held as kind of like a resupply package like we've done in the States, and then we'll pick it up, 30 days after we mail it. Has anybody done that?
Harry, did you do that? Okay. I have heard of people doing this. Theoretically,
Okay.
it is possible. I want to say that with a big fat caveat that the Georgian Post Service is notoriously unreliable. And so I'm always a little hesitant to recommend it, even though I know but technically it should be possible. And I'm pretty sure last year a couple people did. I would recommend scanning through the Slack channel and asking it if you haven't already, on the off chance that that info is there. But if not, again, technically it is possible. We had one of our people look into it last year. So if that's what you guys want to do, I think probably you just want to like make sure to Google translate really clearly in advance what you're asking them to do. And
Right.
like
Okay.
have some record of it. But there are post offices all along the way in the bigger towns like Oni and Sachkhere and Borjomi. So theoretically it should be possible.
Okay.
If that makes you nervous, the more Georgian alternative to doing this is you leave a box of stuff at a guest house or, with a trusted contact in Tbilisi. And when you're getting close to wherever you're going, you ask them to send it on a marshutka, which is like a little minibus, over to the town. And then you go like meet the driver at the town square where the minibus gets off. That is how we transport a lot of things around here.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I asked in Slack, and I got some references to some old threads, but there wasn't anything really more detailed than what you just had to share.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it for being here, guys. And
Yeah,
I'll
excited to see you on the
get in
trail.
Slack with what we end up doing. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hope to see somebody
Amazing.
out there.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Don.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Bjorn.
Yeah, thanks so much for all the information and all the answers to the questions. I just had one bit of a more technical question because I'm a member of the trail building program this summer, but I didn't remember officially signing up for the TCTA. Now I'm wondering how do they overlap because I did get the mails, but I'm not really aware of the Slack, for example. Do I have to do anything else?
Yeah, so there'll be a separate forum, like a separate link to join the Slack channel. So Harry drops that in the chat, I think. There's just a Google form to fill out. Again, I'll send it with the follow-up. But yeah, if you're already a member of the trail building program, you're already supporting us, and thank you so much. We really appreciate it and excited to see you on the trail this summer. So it occasionally happens that people both volunteer and hike, more often like shorter section hikes, but we have had a few like longer term hikers also kind of make their way up to volunteer too. Which section are you going to be working on?
I'm going to work in Dilijan, so in the
fantastic.
second week of July, and then I'm planning on hiking south from there, basically. Maybe not doing everything, but some bits and some longer bits too.
Yeah, brilliant. That'll be a great trip.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Last call. Cool. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there then. Thank you everyone so much for joining. And yeah, once again, if you have any further questions, join the Slack channel. We're getting that up and running again for this coming year. So our hope is that it'll be a really great place to ask hiker specific questions and connect with others. And then also have that in, a channel where people can scan back in previous years and see the discussions, which helps a lot. But for anything else, feel free to reach out to us at info@transcaucasiantrail.org. Always happy to hear from folks. And one last favor, if you go and hike it, please tell us about it. We really love hearing people's stories. It makes it all feel real and it's really motivating. So yeah, let us know what you think. Feel free to send, feedback about trail conditions that need improvements, as well as your favorite sections. We love hearing stories. So please just do stay in touch. And yeah, you're part of the TCT community now. So we hope we'll see you out there. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy hiking, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Happy hiking.
Bye-bye.